What is going on, friends and fellow artists? This is Matt, aka Mr.E in 3D. And guys, as you can tell from the title of this video, I am going to be taking a step away from character art, and I am going to be doing another movie prop. This one of my favorite fictional weapons of all time, the Good Samaritan pistol from the 2004 film Hellboy. Now, as fate would have it, at the time of this recording, our local con is coming up, and Ron Perlman and Selma Blair are both supposed to be in attendance. So, I have decided that I'm going to challenge myself and try to get the Good Samaritan pistol designed, printed, and painted, and hopefully get them both to sign it when we get to the con. Now, I'm going to try and use extrusion modeling using only planes for this process. I may throw in a couple cylinders depending on how far I get along, but I'm super excited. I am out of time, so without further ado, let's go. Okay guys, so starting out, I am going to add a plane to the environment. I'm going to stretch that out, do a quick look at a reference photo I pulled off the internet, and then I'm just going to use my K for knife utility and start drawing out the frame and the barrel of the Samaritan pistol. After I delete the faces I don't need, I will select the barrel portion, hit Shift-D to duplicate those faces, push the new faces aside, and then I will delete the original ones, so that I can have two separate sections for the hinged portions of the gun. I do eventually want to print a version of the gun that opens for reloading bullets, so starting the process now only helps me later on. Here I am simply extruding a section of the barrel that I originally missed, and I will connect it to the rest of the barrel by selecting both vertices, hitting M for merge, and then joining them at the center. I start rounding out the hinge section before deciding to separate the barrel portion from the body. To accomplish this, I select all the faces of the barrel, hit P, and then click on Selection. It's time to start the actual 3D process. I'll begin with the barrel portion. I will select all of the faces, click E to extrude, and then pull them out along the X line into the actual 3D shape. The barrel of the Samaritan gun is an octagon, so I simply draw out the two center faces of the barrel and decide that for this half of the gun, I won't subdivide the surface of the model with modifiers like I typically do. Now, if you watch any of my other videos, you know this is going to be a challenge for me. To do the internal barrel, I will use G to grab the internal lines and then move them into position, while also adding loop cuts with Ctrl R so that I can round out those faces and still keep the octagon shape outside. Once all that is done, I create a mirror modifier, and then I will spin the mesh and turn it around so that I can bring the two halves together for one completely symmetrical barrel portion of the gun. Here I'm just doing some of the initial prep work around the actual hinge section. Now this will be a work in progress throughout the entire build, but here I just want to do a little bit of initial shaping so that I can effectively move on to the back half of the gun and get the hinge section figured out there as well. In order for the back half of the hinge to wrap around the barrel portion, I will have to extrude both inwards as well as outwards, and this involves adding lines and honestly doing a little bit of guesswork as to how much internal space I will need for the chamber itself once I get that part designed. Once all that is done, just as I did with the barrel, I will create a mirror modifier so that I have a completely symmetrical back half of the gun ready to move forward. Again, I'm just doing some details around the hinge section, and I actually make a mistake here as I try to round out the bottom of the hinge as well as the top. There's a brief pause here in the footage as I look at an offline reference photo and I realize I made a mistake and need to correct that later on. Here I start modeling out the actual handle of the gun by adding loop cuts and lines and rounding it out. Now this is tricky as I'm still not trying to subdivide anything at this point in the process. Now it does get somewhat tedious, but I am really happy with the end result. It's time to start adding some details. First, adding the laser sight. This is one of the only times in the process I will use a cylinder versus a plane for obvious reasons. I'm going to go through and add some loop cuts and then scale them out and proportion it into the shape I want. At the sight end of the tube, I will scale in the topmost loop and then hit E to extrude that down into the cylinder and create the actual laser hole. Moving on, it's time to create the cylinder portion. Now the Samaritan only has 4 bullet chambers, and that actually makes things easier for me. Adding symmetrical lines all the way around will help me decide where to put those chambers, and once the faces for those chambers are deleted, I will actually subdivide the surface of this model and round out those edges to form nice round holes. At this point, rounding out the chambers was a completely manual process, and I am still amazed that I actually got the sizing right for all 4 holes. It was completely done by eye, and in the end, once printed, dropping the bullets into the chamber, you would be none the wiser if I didn't tell you they actually fit perfectly. Once the final chamber shaping is complete, I will select all of the faces and extrude it straight up into the 3-dimensional cylinder. Now, the Samaritan has this really unique, albeit non-practical detail, where the cylinder has gaps around each bullet chamber, allowing you to see the bullet in the casing beneath. Now, I'll use the knife utility and draw in some lines around the top for each of these lips, and then extrude them out straight up and complete this really cool little detail and finishing up the chamber so that we can move forward. The barrel of the Samaritan has this raised vented bridge for the front sight. I'm simply going to duplicate the topmost face of the barrel, separate it out into its own model by hitting P, and then add loop cuts and extrude out those details. Moving on, I'm now looking at another reference pick before starting the top latch piece of the gun. My plan is eventually to use magnets to lock the hinge, so this is more decorative than anything. It can simply be a flat object that is attached later on. This piece also has a relief section where the bullet and casing are visible underneath. It's a super cool detail I want to make sure that I capture by deleting the holes on the face of the plane before extruding it into 3 dimensions. I'm again going to use the K for knife utility and draw out the hammer onto a plane. I'll extrude it out into 3 dimensions and then extrude the details on either side by hitting E and then hitting S to scale along the Z. Next, it's onto the circular piece that I believe is supposed to be a flash guard at the back of the cylinder compartment. Simply using a cylinder's top face and deleting the rest, I'll cut a hammer slot into it before extruding it again into 3 dimensions and putting it in place. I'll again draw out the trigger using the knife utility on a plane and then extrude it out into 3 dimensions. Now for the trigger guard itself, I was honestly starting to lose patience. I split this up over a couple of days and I was fast running out of time. I extruded it out and around and merged the back to the front by using the M to merge the vertices. It's not a perfect process, but I did get it done. I then shaped it out as best I could by adding and manipulating some loop cuts. It seems like the closer I get to the end of this project, the more I realize I have to do. Here I model out the hinge release for the side of the gun. I'll draw this out just like the other details using the K for knife utility on a plane, and then extruding it out into form. Now, I don't plan to have this function, as again, ultimately I plan to use magnets to hold the hinge together, but it's a really cool detail that I have to include nonetheless. Down to the final structural details, I model out a bracket for the front of the gun that connects the laser sight to the bottom of the barrel. With all of the screws and final details in place, I add one more piece, a flat support bar that sits between the barrel and the laser sight. And with that, the modeling is now complete. I could not be happier with the final product. Now it's off to the printer with 4 days left to spare to get it printed and prepped and ready for the con. Now, about 3/4 of the way through the designing process, I came up with another really cool idea. Rather than just have a generic stand for the gun, I decided I was going to create a hand with fire coming off of it, representing Liz Sherman, Selma Blair's character. Now, unfortunately, I didn't record any of the creation process. I could kick myself. I am so sorry. But I will show you guys the final product. I am super happy with it. I did get Selma Blair to sign it, and she absolutely loved it. So here you go, guys. Here's a couple pics from the con, and then I'll show you the guys the final product. Now, the con has very weird rules about getting video of actors and actresses signing the props. But I was allowed to take pictures. So I did. On the left here, you can see I got a picture of Ron Perlman signing my Samaritan pistol. And on the right, I did get a tableside selfie with Selma Blair, who is an absolute sweetheart. She was just the coolest. And there on the table behind her, you can see the fiery hand gun stand that I created for the Samaritan. And I'll be showing you guys that here shortly. So there you go, guys. Mission accomplished. I got it printed. I got it painted. I did get to show it to Ron Perlman and Selma Blair, both of whom were really, really cool. And here it is. Now, I'm not sure if you can see it or not, but this is a hand, and the flames are actually holding the gun up and wrapping around the gun. Super happy that I thought of this. I think it turned out really cool. I am going to go ahead and get a case for this, just to keep it safe. But I couldn't be happier. Now, this is something that I haven't done in a while, and it really did inspire me. I think I'm going to be doing a lot more prop replicas moving forward. Keep an eye out for those. I have a lot of ideas. Can't wait to get started with them. As always, Thank you guys so much for the support that I'm seeing in the channel. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't. I appreciate y'all so much. Have a great day.